All right, let's get into it. Today, we're jumping into the really dramatic story of a nation at a turning point. We're talking about 1 Samuel, the story of how ancient Israel went from this loose collection of tribes to a full-blown monarchy. It's a story where the fate of a whole nation gets forged in the successes and maybe even more so, the failures of its first couple of kings.
So let's just start with the question we're always asking, right? What actually makes a great leader? Is it about being strong? Is it about being popular? Is it being chosen by some higher power? That very question is right at the heart of this entire story.
You see, the central conflict is set up from the get-go. It's a tale of two different choices. There's the king the nation demanded for themselves, and then there's the king that was chosen for them. And, as we're about to see, those two choices lead to some dramatically different places.
Okay, so our story kicks off with a nation in crisis. The people are demanding a massive change in the way they're governed.
Now, to really get why they wanted a king, you've got to understand what they had before. For generations, Israel was led by figures called judges. And don't think of courtroom judges. Think more like charismatic, pop-up leaders, military heroes, and spiritual guides who would rise to the occasion whenever the tribes were in trouble.
So what was the problem? Why the big push for a king all of a sudden? Well, it was kind of a perfect storm. They were facing constant threats from enemies like the Philistines. Their current judge, a really respected guy named Samuel, was getting old. But here's the real kicker. They looked around at their neighbors, saw these powerful kings, and basically said, "We want that. We want to be like the other nations." And in doing that, they were pretty much rejecting God's direct leadership through this whole system of judges.
And that brings us to the guy caught right in the middle of all this, Samuel, the last of Israel's great judges. Samuel is such a unique character. His mother, Hannah, had prayed for a son, and when he was born, she dedicated him to God's service for his entire life. So he grows up to be both a prophet and a judge, which gives him this incredible spiritual authority with the people.
Now, here's where things get really insightful about the people's mindset. At one point, they take the Ark of the Covenant, this sacred object that represents God's presence, and they treat it like a magic talisman. They haul it into battle thinking it's an automatic win button, and they get absolutely crushed. The Ark is even captured. It's this brilliant moment that shows how they were just looking for easy fixes and symbols of power instead of actual faith and obedience.
So, the people get what they want. Their demand for a king is answered. But the man they get, Saul, becomes this truly tragic figure in the first chapter of Israel's monarchy.
Saul's story is just a classic cautionary tale. He's anointed king. He's exactly what the people asked for. He's tall, he's impressive, he looks the part. But his character flaws, they start to show, and fast. He disobeys directed commands from God, acting out of pride and insecurity, and because of that, he's rejected by God as king, and his whole reign just spirals downward into this paranoid, all-consuming jealousy of the guy who's meant to replace him. And that successor, the one chosen by God, not by the people, could not be more different. This is where we see the rise of David, the shepherd king. So while King Saul is still on the throne, Samuel gets sent on this top-secret mission to anoint the next king. But he doesn't go to a palace or a military compound. He goes to the house of a guy named Jesse and anoints his youngest son David, a shepherd boy, a musician, as the future ruler of Israel. Talk about an unlikely pick. And this right here, this comparison is the absolute core of the whole book. You have Saul, who is the people's demand, versus David, who is God's choice. Saul looked the part, tall and impressive. David was just some overlooked shepherd. Saul's reign was defined by his pride and disobedience, while David, even with all his own flaws to come, is described as a man after God's own heart. But being the chosen one doesn't make David's path to the throne easy. Not at all. His growing fame as a hero just pours gasoline on King Saul's paranoid fire. And even though he forms this incredibly deep friendship with Saul's own son, Jonathan, David is forced to live as a fugitive, hunted relentlessly by the very king he's supposed to replace.
So we've seen all this chaos, all this drama. As the book starts to wrap up, what are we supposed to take away from this chaotic birth of a kingdom? The story of Israel's first king comes to its tragic end. Saul dies in a battle against the very enemy he was chosen to defeat in the first place, the Philistines. His death marks the final, bloody end of an era and clears the path for what comes next.
You know, at the end of the day, 1 Samuel isn't just an old history story. It's digging into these huge, timeless themes. You see the stark contrast between obedience and disobedience with David and Saul,
You see God's sovereignty, how he can work out his plan through the most unlikely people. You see just how important humility is. And for people reading this later, it's totally setting the stage, creating this promise for a future perfect king from David's family line.
And that's really the story of 1 Samuel in a nutshell. A nation demands a leader that looks right on the outside, and his reign ends in absolute tragedy. And all the while, God is quietly preparing a totally different kind of leader, someone whose heart is in the right place to finally take the throne.
This ancient story leaves us with a really provocative question that feels, well, pretty modern. It draws this sharp line between the leader a nation wants, someone who's impressive, who fits our expectations, and the leader it truly needs. And it just makes you wonder, which one are we still looking for today?